Hi, my name is Al Patrick, and I worked 2 stints at PGN in the early 90s.
I joined PGN in September of 2007 as staff writer. I was there for 5 years in that role, and then in 2012, when our former editor left, I took over the role of editor and was there for another 5 years.
PGN was challenging because not long after I got hired, news came of a strange infection in gay men in Los Angeles.
My name is Sarah Blazuki, and I was PGN editor from 2006 to 2012.
I worked as editor at the Philadelphia Gay News from June 2020 to June 2023.
I was a staff writer at PGN beginning in 2016, and then I became editor in 2023.
I remember, when I became a publisher, which was very early in my life, obviously. I'm very old now, after 50 years. But I wanted us to be different than anything I saw out there. I wanted people to realize this was a serious newspaper. And I think the best way to realize that is to look at the first two covers. First one had Walter Lear in the cover. That was really important, and you probably don't know that name, but Walter Lear was the first state health commissioner in the United States to come out publicly. That was a big deal. No one had ever done that before. And we even broke that, made it larger in our second issue when the cover person was the governor of the state of Pennsylvania. No governor had ever been interviewed by LGBT media to that point.
At the time, PGN was a mix of local community news and hard-hitting investigative reporting. One story that sticks with me from my time as editor at PGN all these years later is the story of John Eastwood. He was a gay hairdresser who was found dead in his apartment. The police were called, and so they got there and they found John tied up with his hands behind his back, laying in a pool of blood, and he had been dead at least a day, they said. Their first theory about the crime was it was a sex act gone wrong, and the police were very willing then, I think, to move on. There was no criminal or malicious intent, and they were going to, wrap up the case and I think sort of let it drop. What we did as at the Philadelphia Gay News is we tried to humanize John, and we wrote a story about who he was, a favorite uncle, a cherished brother, and we wrote the details of this story. We wrote a strong editorial condemning the police for immediately identifying it as a sex act gone wrong and not a case of murder. The family agreed with us and supported us. And what was most important about PGN's role in this is not only did we keep the police focused on the murder and the investigation, but we made it so that other media in Philadelphia, having seen our coverage, also covered the story. So to me, this story illustrates the importance of the gay press and the nation, and also in Philadelphia, in that we give a voice to the voiceless.
A lot of the stories that we reported on involved a lot of the violence against trans women of color. There were an unfortunate number of incidents that we covered. And I think we covered them in a way that the mainstream media at the time wasn't really covering. I think because PGN has such credibility with the community, we were able to really make connections with the victims' families, with their friends. People like Stacy Blahnik, her partner, every year we did an anniversary story and I would follow up with him. Kyra Cordova was another trans woman of color. And, we got to know her mom and her family, and we did the same type of thing. So really kind of putting that face, I think, to these headlines was something that we did really well at PGN that I think mainstream media really wasn't able to do.
The very first week that I was editor, the first paper that I was putting to bed, the New Jersey Supreme Court marriage case came down, where New Jersey said that the state either had to provide marriage or the equivalent thereof, and the eventually state legislature punted and they chose the equivalent thereof. But the case came down on Wednesday and we were going to press, and we had to get the story out. So it was a mad scramble on what was happening. We had to get the case, we had to read the case, we had to understand what was the story and the holding, and put that all together and rip up the front page and put out the news story to get that on the front page, because that was clearly the most important thing.
I worked as editor at the Philadelphia Gay News from June 2020 to June 2023. It was a very exciting time. It was during the COVID lockdown, so the staff had completely gone remote and nobody came to the office. We all worked via Zoom and Slack and Google Docs, and we were able to put together the paper for that time without missing a deadline. One of the stories we worked on that I'm most proud of is a series called Remember Them. And you hear mainstream media report on deaths of trans people, sadly, regularly. But oftentimes the mainstream media doesn't focus on what made those people human. And so we did a series called Remember Them, where we took the people who had sadly been murdered every year in 2021, except we described them based on their humanity, based on their hobbies, people they loved, things they did, breaths they took. We didn't mention how they died because we felt that the important thing was how they lived. Philadelphia Gay News is incredibly important because without information, you can't make change. Without information, you can't hold people accountable. Without information, you can't make the best decisions for your life and your family. PGN gives the LGBTQ community the information they need to live their life and make the change they want to see in the world.
In the early days of PGN, we got to do very groundbreaking stories. Victoria Brownworth interviewed lesbian nuns. She also got to sit with unhoused LGBTQ youth. In addition, Tim Swick covered the Niza Morris case from the very, very beginning, and he still continues to cover that case when other outlets have let that go.
I remember when I did an editorial, or maybe it was an op-ed piece, about why Philadelphia didn't have a gay rights bill. I mean, certainly one had been introduced in 1973. Mark Siegel and I were part of the effort to pass that bill, but it failed in 1975. Here it was 1983, and we still didn't have a gay rights bill. And the result of my editorial or opinion piece was that the Philadelphia Lesbian and Gay Task Force started pushing for a reintroduction of a gay rights bill, and it passed in 1983. That was one of the things I learned about being at PGN, was that we could have an impact. We could affect change. We had power. The press has power. That's something that the press throughout this country needs to remember in these difficult times in which we're living. The press has power. I know that PGN will always remember that.
I love the PGN, we could shine. Our voices strong, our dreams align. We had the power to make things right. To stand for truth, to fight the fight. The press can light the darkest night. A spark of hope, a guiding light. A crusade.